So I welcome all the participants to the third session of this third day of 1 week online faculty development program on new approaches in geotechnical earthquake engineering. We are glad and fortunate to with have with us Dr. R.K. Khare sir. He is the professor and dean of academics from GSITS Indore. He has completed graduation in civil engineering with post graduation in structural engineering, and his area of research is thermal stresses in fiber reinforced composite, laminated plates, and shells. His prominent areas of work are finite element analysis and design of structures, financial seismic risk analysis of buildings and structures, nonlinear and incremental dynamic analysis of structures, seismic analysis and design of precast concrete building structures, computer aided analysis and design of structures, and so on. We are thankful that Sir could manage out time from his busy schedule and enlighten us over the important topics regarding the faculty development program. Thank you so much, sir. On behalf of IPS Academy, Institute of Engineering and Science, Civil Engineering Department, I welcome you, sir, to this faculty development program. And I request you to please take over the session, sir.
Thank you very much. Actually, Amit had invited me for this talk, and uh, I was busy in some assignments of being academics actually. So I requested Nikunj Binani. He is my PhD student.
Should I make him a presenter, sir?
No, no.
Good afternoon, sir.
हाँ, good afternoon. अभी आवाज आ रही मेरी?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
हाँ, कुछ जरा यहाँ गड़बड़ हो रहा था. मेरी
जी सर.
प्रेजेंटर निकुंज बिनानी बन जाएगा.
हम
तो
दोनों को उनको भी बना देते हैं सर.
ठीक है, ठीक. So just a minute. There are two already open to.
Sir, I've made both of you a presenter, sir. So you can share the screen.
Yes. Huh. I don't know, means actually so many teams are opened. Yes. Just a minute. Yeah, there are two things. Yeah, now it's okay. Must be all right. So I was telling you, still there is some problem, I think. Why is this ego? I will rejoin.
Sir, there was some mic that was open. Now I think it should be.
Okay.
It shouldn't be interfering.
Yes, now it's okay, I think. So you are able to listen? Yes.
Yes, sir.
So I was telling you that in this field, I have guided few master's thesis and one PhD is working under me, Nikunj Binani. So seismic hazard analysis of Indore, some microzonation of Indore city, then seismic hazard analysis of Punasa Dam, then seismic hazard analysis of RRCAT Indore. Some master thesis are done under my guidance. So, and one PhD, Nikunj Binani is doing PhD, and the topic is seismic hazard analysis and response, site response of Nimad and Malwa region. So that PhD is going on. So he has done a lot of work in this seismic hazard analysis. There are two methods: deterministic seismic hazard analysis and probabilistic seismic hazard analysis. So he will explain all the participants in detail. He has done some example problems also and tell about the seismicity of this region and in general about seismicity and how the calculations are done for seismic hazard analysis. Actually, this particular topic is very important for civil engineers and structural engineers particularly, because while analyzing structures, they need to know first what is, like Indian code has given zone factor. So they need to know what seismic activities can occur in that site. What may be the magnitude of earthquake? So accordingly, structure needs to be designed. I have visited Bhuj after Bhuj earthquake, Bhuj and Ahmedabad, and seen the problems after that earthquake. The structures were designed, those even structures, RCC structure designed as per IS 456, they were also having some resistance, but they have not designed the structures at all using codes. So those structures were collapsed. RCC structures, maybe RCC structures, maybe masonry structures. So I have seen many structures were collapsed and during Bhuj earthquake, and open story. That particular this earthquake is known for open story earthquake, means one parking floor is going for down floor. So that was also one of the regions in RCC structure. So structures, if they are designed even using IS 456, they can withstand the earthquakes that I have experienced. So that is very necessary. And this topic is geotechnical earthquake engineering, so in that this is appropriate topic actually, seismic hazard analysis. So I'll not take much time, and I'll hand over the session to this presentation to Nikunj Binani. I request Nikunj Binani to present the analysis procedures and then example columns and about the seismic hazard analysis, PSHA, GSHA. So Nikunj, you can take over and you can start.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you very much, Amit. Yes. Yes, you can start.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Khare sir. Thank you, Amit sir, for providing me this opportunity. It was actually a kind of opportunity for me to present my work that I had done at somehow level in this particular field to all the participants over here. Sir, is my screen visible?
Not yet.
Is it visible now?
Yes, yes, no.
So, good afternoon to one and all, and with due permission from Amit sir and Khare sir,
Yes, sure.
shall I
Go ahead.
proceed with
Yes,
the
yes,
topic?
please. Go ahead. Yes, yes.
Seismic hazard assessment, it is one of the most important area that we should look upon, because recently we have observed that a number of earthquakes are striking the world at number of places, and because these forces are acting, and this will be a kind of threat to the structures that we as a civil engineer or as a structural engineer we use to construct, whether it is a dam structure or it is a bridge structure or it is a either a commercial building or a residential building. So we have seen that because the losses that are being associated with this particular earthquake as a force is quite hazardous, and the loss is in huge, that cannot be measured in some amount of rupees. It can be in millions or trillions of money. So that's why it is very important for us to design a structure corresponding to the probable seismic hazard level that is going to act at that particular location. So the first thing that I'll start with this particular quote. It is a very famous quote by Steve Jobs. The only way to do great work is to love what you do. So it is basically a kind of research interest that has been generated or by the constant inspiration from my supervisor, Professor Khare sir. And it is because of that only that I am doing this particular research in this particular field of seismic hazard assessment. So it is just for the praise of Khare sir that he is a kind of great teacher to me, who always used to inspire me to do research in this particular field of seismic hazard. Following are the research interest that as already been mentioned in the profile of the Khare sir, that he used to work in the area of finite element analysis, nonlinear and incremental dynamic analysis of structures, computer aided analysis and design of structures. And amongst that, all these areas, one of the areas that the supervisor used to guide us is in the area of seismic hazard analysis. So before starting the topic of seismic hazard assessment, we should actually understand what that seismic hazard assessment is and how it has been related. So that seismic hazard assessment falls into the category of geotechnical earthquake engineering. So geotechnical earthquake engineering, these are basically two different branches of engineering, and they comes up together, and when they are clubbed together to do some kind of research work activity, because engineering is all about interacting with the other disciplinaries. Like in the field of civil engineering, we use that we observe that the structural engineering also combines with the geotechnical engineering, because in order to with this stand a building on the ground, we need parameter details of geotech as well as the structures. So this geotechnical earthquake engineering is a very vast field, and from the this vast field of geotechnical earthquake engineering, seismic hazard assessment is one of the parameters that we'll cover in this particular lecture. Starting with the engineering. So what actually the engineering is? This engineering is basically the scientific application of scientific principles to the particular problems in a safe, efficient, and economic manner. So these words, safe, efficient, and economic manner, is very much important over here, because ultimately, from any of the branch of engineering that we are dealing with, we are just applying the scientific principles that we have studied during our school times, and we are applying that in the form of a solution to a particular problem, and that too in a very safe, efficient, and economic manner. Okay. This engineering also concerned with some kind of creation of new system, research, design, and development. Coming on to the topic of earthquake engineering, this earthquake engineering is a multidisciplinary, is basically an integration of multidisciplinary knowledge, because earthquake engineering involves the knowledge of basic sciences as well as the science-based engineering. So they are cumulative together, and the reason for cumulative that together, and the reason for that is that we want to reduce the ultimate seismic risk. So that risk should be within the acceptable level, and that acceptable level would be within the socio as well as the economic, because the earthquake, when it hits a particular area, it not only affects the economy of that area, but it also affects the social status. Like the example we have, the earthquake of the Bhuj that occurred on the 26th January 2001. It not only hit Bhuj, but what has been observed that the losses that it has caused was quite humorous. So there we can see from various certain examples we can observe that the earthquake that generally causes, that not only causes the loss of life, but they also cause the loss of infrastructure, which ultimately leads to the loss of economy. So as an earthquake engineering, we are trying to bring that level to some kind of acceptable levels, so that it can be easily bearable without much loss of money as well as the loss of human life. So this earthquake engineering majorly deals with the effects of earthquakes. So how it affects, because earthquake when hits, it's not only hit the environment, but we are also trying to deal with the effects of earthquakes that can reduce those effects. So this is also a part of earthquake engineering, that we are trying to reduce those effects that any of the earthquake has caused. But the study of the earthquake, or we can say that the most of the development that have occurred in the field of earthquake engineering is during the last 40 to 50 years after independence. So in the last 40 to 50 years, what we observe that in most of the countries where the earthquakes were quite regular phenomena that can occur at any point of time, because it is a quite of random phenomena that can happen anywhere in the world at any location. So we will observe that most of the work related to the development of the building codes for this particular earthquake, corresponding to the earthquake resistant design, has been done in the last 40 to 50 years. And the various methods have been developed to assess the risk that has been associated with it, and how to reduce that hazard to a acceptable level. This field of earthquake engineering, these majorly draw aspects on geology, seismology, geotechnical engineering, structural engineering, risk analysis, and the other technical fields. So, looking into all these terms, what we'll observe that this field of earthquake engineering is a very broad field. It is not a very narrow field. It covers various aspects of the engineering along with the basic sciences. The practice of this earthquake engineering, it considers the social, economic, and political factors as well. It not only considers the social and economic factors, but it also considers the political factors. The political factors generally, because the overall fund that has been assigned to this particular zone for the rehabilitation and retrofitting and all this particular, because the earthquake when hits a particular area, a large amount of loss has been occurred. So it definitely involves some kind of political factors along with the social as well as the economic factors. Geotechnical earthquake engineering. So, geotechnical earthquake engineering, it generally utilizes the scientific principles of soil mechanics, rock mechanics, soil dynamics, and engineering geology. So, these are few examples that I quoted over here. That apart from that, it also utilizes the scientific principles related to somewhat structural engineering as well for the design of a soil system or a particular soil interaction system, which will help us in analyzing and design the structures. So, earthquake. Dealing with the earthquake, so earthquake is basically a kind of energy that has been generated in the ground. As we all know that energy is a can neither be created nor it can be destroyed. So the energy that has been released during an earthquake, it is in the form of a kind of vibration, waves, or motion. So the vibrations are basically a kind of motion that has been generated because of the release of large amount of or huge amount of energy during an earthquake. So any motion that repeats itself after a certain interval of time is called vibration. And because earthquake is a kind of phenomena that we can't predict whether it will come today or it will come after 10 years or it will come after 100 years or it will come after thousand of years. So it is a kind of phenomena that will repeat itself after certain interval of time. So the motion that has been associated with this, that is called vibration. So one of the example of the vibration that we generally observe is the swinging of a pendulum. Like whenever we pull the pendulum up to a certain level and release it, then we find that it will continuously used to vibrate over a longer period of time unless it has come to its stable initial position. So because earthquake is a kind of phenomena that can happen in any of the direction, so the vibration generated by it can happen in all the three directions. So we can observe over here that uh, depending upon the direction of the earthquake or the force in which the way or the way direction in which the waves were traveling or transmitting the force to the structure, it can be categorized into a kind of longitudinal vibration along the length of the structure. Perpendicular to that, a kind of horizontal vibration it can also happen, or it can also some kind of create a vibration that in the vertical direction. So whenever earthquake releases energy, the vibration of the structure can happen in any of the direction, and because of that some kind of torsional movement or a rocking effect can be generated along these directions. So this diagram particularly represent the direction of the motion of the earthquake, like the ground acceleration that has been given over here, because the waves in which the earthquake waves has been generated, and they used to travel in a particular direction. So assuming that this ground acceleration has been generated in this particular direction, and this is a stable structure that has been already constructed in that particular area. And because of this particular ground acceleration, what we observe, this ground acceleration is trying to move, impose some kind of force in this particular leftward direction. And because of that, because of the inertia, resultant inertia, because we have studied from the Newton's basics law of motion that to every action there is equal and opposite reaction. So when this force will try to move this building up in this particular direction, and because this particular building is in a stable condition, and it will try to move in the opposite direction to the force, and it is because of the inertia, right? uh, During this particular transfers of or reaction corresponding to this ground acceleration, you will observe that some portion will undergo tension and some portion of the building will undergo compression. Apart from that, because the soil particles that are also along the foundation of the building, they will also exert some kind of horizontal soil pressure, and friction force will also be generated. So whenever an earthquake hits a particular building, this kind of phenomena will occur, and the foundation that we used to provide in a building will try to uh, act as a barrier or transfer the load of this particular to the ground. So this is one of the foundation that has been shown over here. And in any of the structure that we use to construct as a part of our infrastructure facilities, there are numerous types of foundation that has been generally seen or observed. So that can be a shallow footing, that can be a pile driven or a pile cap, it can be a raft foundation, it can be a ground anchored, or it can be a racked pile. So n number of foundations are available for us to safely transfer the forces of the structure to the ground. And all these elements that we use to construct, they should also perform stably and keep the structure upright in position even during the event of an earthquake. So that was the basic design, uh, that was the basic expectation that we used to have from any of the structural designer. Looking to the occurrence of earthquakes worldwide. So, like before 1900, we don't have that much of instrumental facilities developed in order to record the earthquakes that are being occurring throughout the world. So, before that, we don't have much that data before that, before the 1900. But past after 1900, with the development of the advanced technologies, development of the instruments, it has been feasible for us to actually record the earthquake events, and even we can observe the kind of magnitude or the amount of energy that has been released during an earthquake. So here in this table we can observe that all the earthquakes, depending upon their magnitude, they have been classified into number of categories, right? So what we can observe, that the earthquake of a magnitude 1 to 2, the number of earthquakes, you can see the very vast number of earthquakes have occurred throughout the world. But coming on to the some kind of moderate earthquakes, we will find that the magnitude of 5 to 5.9 magnitude, the number of earthquakes are reduced to 800. And coming on to the major earthquakes, some of great earthquakes like of magnitude 8 and higher, we will observe that the number of earthquakes per year were relatively very less. So overall, if you plot a graph of these particular number of earthquakes and as the magnitude range, what you will observe that uh, the earthquakes number, as soon as the magnitude is increasing, what you will observe that this particular graph is decreasing, the number of other earthquakes is decreasing. And these decreasing of earthquakes or the earthquake events are basically in a kind of exponential manner. So overall, what we observe from this table is that relatively the earthquake events of higher magnitude are relatively lesser as compared to the earthquake of lower magnitude. But moreover, depending upon the areas in which we are working, so the earthquakes majorly, the earthquake of up to magnitude 4 or the minor earthquakes, it has been generally observed that these earthquakes of this particular magnitude will not cause a major kind of damage to the structure. But the earthquakes beyond the magnitude 4, depending upon the frequency range, the distance at which it has occurred, and the locality or the local site effects, and the various parameters that we consider. So the earthquakes of magnitude higher than 4 will ultimately leads to some kind of disastrous situations. So in a big picture, if we observe that how an earthquake event will happen and how the waves will travel and it will ultimately so hit the particular structure. So here we particularly categorize the overall phenomena of earthquake in three categories. First one is the earthquake source that actually defines from where this particular release of energy has taken place. It may be a fault, it can be because of some kind of volcanic activity, or it can be because of some kind of tectonic movements, or so that can be any of the causes for the release of this particular energy. Once the energy have been released, it has been uh, traveling towards the structure, because energy can either be constr- uh, uh, as per following the law of conservation of energy, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be converted from one form to the another. So because of the earthquake phenomena, the waves have been generated and these waves are traveling in a particular direction to the towards the structure. So as soon as this particular waves have been generated and the energy has been released, this energy is converted in the form of waves which are traveling to the structures. So here the phenomena of the wave propagation comes into the picture. And once this particular waves travels up to the particular ground level and hits the structure, here what we observe that we need to consider the phenomena of site response. So in a big picture, we can understand this particular uh, complete phenomena of earthquake that has been associated up to the site response in particular three fragments. This will give you a more better idea, because like the energy that has been released because of this particular fault, and from that the waves has started traveling. So once the energy has been released, this particular fault has released the energy and the energy has started moving towards the structure, and these waves are traveling through the ground. So initially these waves may be in the form of a body wave, and later on when it reaches the surface, that can these body waves may have get converted into the form of surface waves. So overall, the structure that we used to construct at the surface, so generally we used to provide the foundation up to this particular deep level that is known as the engineering seismic base layer. But moreover, this ground motion that we use to determine is generally at this particular seismic bedrock level. So these are the two motions that are being generally associated. The first one is the free field ground motion, like an energy has been released and it has been moving in a particular direction and reaching at the surface. So this is the particular direction in which this particular waves are propagating, and this kind of motion is basically known as your a free field ground motion. But when this particular free field ground motion, because the motion of the waves is somewhat different, and the response of the building will be somewhat different when this free field ground motion, because it is having some kind of own period of vibration or natural period, and the response of the building is also different when these together combines, like, because in the earlier picture you have observed that it is directly hitting to the surface level, whereas in this particular what we observe that it is hitting at the foundation level of some building. So the response of the building was somewhat different, and the response of the waves that were traveling was quite different. And ultimately, because of the combined influence of both this, that the waves as well as the building, what we observe that some kind of ground motion has been influenced by this building. So you can observe from this particular motion that has been occurred at the building base, and the response of the building, and the ground motion that is being finally received at the surface. So there is quite difference between the ground motion that has been generally observed at the surface because of the response of the building. Similarly, if we are providing some kind of material over here which can also additional material, like in the case of base isolation that we used to provide, or some kind of material, additional material apart from the ground, so that can also affect the particular response of the building. The general approach, this is the thing that we generally use to explain by this as well, that acceleration response spectrum of ground motion is somewhat different, and this particular free field motion has been deconvoluted, and this, when this comes in contact with the motion at bedrock, it is particularly affected. And again, when this particular motion has been hit to the structure, the overall response of the building will be affected. So in this manner, we completely observe the particular picture of this ground motion traveling uh, right from the generation of the earthquake waves to the ultimate response of the building. It was the basic equation that we generally used for the subject of structural dynamics, where we used to understand the kind of motion, whether it is a damped motion, undamped motion. So in order to cope up with that, this equation has been used, and this approach can directly be related to the field of earthquake engineering. So it is one of the wonderful quote that I had read somewhere, that a big quake has to occur before the public will act to beef up building codes and formulate plans for disaster management. Right, because unless and until such kind of forces will act, people will not start working in that particular direction, and ultimately build up the building codes. And these codes will ultimately help us in planning for better disaster management. Like, if you people will find that the earthquake code that we generally used in India has been revised number of times, but that has the revision has been done in the last 40-50 years only. One more revision that has been come, like the Bhuj earthquake when it hits the Bhuj. Earlier, the Bhuj was also considered as a kind of some kind of stable region, and it has not been considered in that zone 4 or zone 5 region. And it is not expected that such a big earthquake can hit over there and cause such kind of disastrous losses, not only of economy but also as the infrastructure as well as the social losses. So in order to go for the development, such kind of that this quote only provides us the information that if any of the big earthquake will occur, so we should be prepared for that, and we should start working in the direction, and prepare the plans for the disaster management accordingly. Actually, earthquakes, it not only kinds allow only the losses to the structure, but it also help us in identifying the mistakes that has been generally made during the design and construction process. So, like one of the example that I would like to quote over here, the lateral ties that we used to provide in beams as well as in the columns. So lateral ties were we generally used to provide in the columns, and the in the beams we used to provide stirrups. So there is some kind of provisions given in the code related to the bending of the ends of the particular lateral ties and stirrups. So at many of the places or sites we have observed that people don't used to ignore such kind of bending of those particular in that direction, and how that should be bent accordingly. So the earthquakes generally provide us the information, because when we used to see the case studies of Bhuj earthquake, because numerous researchers have worked in that particular direction during the earthquake, and based upon the pictures that we generally used to observe in number of FDPs and lectures, we observe that there are various mistakes that have been committed while design and construction process of those buildings. So these earthquakes also provide us information about the mistakes that have been done in the previous structures that can be rectified in the new construction structures. So this aspect of earthquake engineering is always a kind of challenging and fascinating one, and it provides us a kind of not only an educational value, but uh, beyond its immediate objectives. So the study of earthquakes is important not only for scientific, social, and economic reasons, but also for some other reasons. Because when we are dealing with the earthquake forces, these forces are basically dynamic in nature, and these forces are operating within the earth, and these forces are majorly generated because of the stress builds up through time. Because it is not like that ki the earthquake can occur in the same day, like the strain will build in the same day, because it is because of there are numerous reasons that can cause earthquake, whether it is a fault movement, tectonic plate movement, or it can be a eruption of volcano. So all these things ultimately leads to the buildup of stress, and ultimately leading to the development of strain in that particular strain energy at that particular location. And once that stress has been built up, and it actually crosses some kind of limits, then it release some kind of stored strain energy that has been accumulated over there, and this stored strain energy ultimately leads to the earthquake. So this was the typical picture of the tourist map of Gujarat, where the epicenter related to the Bhuj earthquake has been mentioned over there. So you can see that this earthquake has hit at this particular location where this star has been marked. And you can find that number of locations were there that can be used for the various purposes, where it can be a wildlife sanctuary. So this earthquake has not only hit Bhuj, but it has also affected the nearby region. Dealing with the technical information that had occurred at Bhuj earthquake, that this earthquake occurred at 8:46 a.m. and its reading on the Richter scale is approximately 6.9, and the epicenter is tentatively located at 23.40 north and 70.32 east. The depth of this earthquake has been approximately estimated as about 24 kilometers. And this earthquake epicenter is located at 20 kilometers from Bhuj. Okay. The Bhuj is this kind of city which is having a population of approximately 1,50,000, and uh, this was the economic damage of approximately 30,000 crores. So you can see the any of the earthquake of such a big magnitude, 6.9, can kind such huge losses in terms of money along with the social losses. Dealing with the internal structure of earth, so it was the internal structure of earth and up to the various levels, the crust, core, mantle, how it has been classified. And in this particular internal structure of earth only, these waves used to travel, and they ultimately try to reach at the uppermost part or the crust surface in the lithosphere section, where our building structures are being constructed. Hmm. I'll start from the history that it was one of the old images that I had found somewhere from one of the FDPs of Professor Goddard. And in that, he has mentioned that earlier that around some kind of million years ago, the various plates that are being arranged in such a manner. And slowly, what we observed that because of some kind of movements, these plates used to move away from each other and that results into the formation of some kind of ridges throughout the world. So that was a long back, millions of years ago. It has been estimated that all the plates were connected thoroughly, but relatively with some kind of displacement that has been continuously occurring in those plates and the movements of the various materials that has been lying in this particular various layers of the internal structure of earth. And because of that, we have observed that the various countries, continents have moved apart from each other, result into the formation of some kind of ridges that has been marked over here in the form of pink lines. Also, because earthquake are not only caused because of the tectonic plates, it can also be caused because of the eruption of the volcanoes. So what we observe that this the region where these volcanoes are found in quite high numbers, it has been observed that this earthquake phenomena hit this particular area very frequently. Like this is particular the area that has been shaded over here is known as ring of fire, and the most of the volcanoes of the world are or we can say approximately 80% of the volcanoes lie in this particular area only. So here what we observe that because earthquake in case of volcanic eruption, it also leads to the release of huge amount of energy along with the some kind of lava material. So here also they can also generate some kind of earthquake and leads to the occurrence of vibration that ultimately transfers to the structure. So इसी particular area में what we observe that the number of earthquakes that are generally observed is relatively very much high. Coming on to this particular Indian plate or our country or the formation of this particular Tibetan plateau or the rise of Himalayas, what has been observed that uh, our Indian plate is continuously driving inside the Eurasian plate. So we can see that from this particular picture that this is the Indian plate that has been marked in somewhat pink color on the left hand side, and on the right hand side it is Eurasian plate, and they are just trying to form a kind of convergent boundary, and because of that convergence one plate is trying to slip below the other, like Indian plate is trying to slip below this Eurasian plate, and because of that the reference point that has been marked over here, you can see that because of the movement of this particular Indian plate below this Eurasian plate, it ultimately giving rise to the Himalayas. So that's why Himalayas are known as the youngest mountain of the world because they are continuously rising. So that was the reason that initially the Indian continent is continuously moving towards the Eurasian plate. So you can see the movement of India as a whole country, how it has been moved, how it has moved. The Indian landmass has moved, started some kind of 71 million years ago. It has started in such a way and it is continuously entering towards this particular Eurasian plate. And this is the current position where our country is today. So you can see the that movement or this movement of this particular, because India as a subcontinent as a very big landmass, it is moving continuously, but it is moving at a very slow rate. So you can see that in 71 million years ago, it was somewhat lying below, somewhat below the equator. But at 55 million years ago, it was lying somewhere here. And at the end of approximately around uh, 38 million years ago, it was here, and it was around 10 million years ago, and it was the current position. So you can see that the equator line that we generally use to understand to divide the earth in two parts. So our Indian subcontinent or landmass has moved in this particular direction. So it was the The diagram depicts on the screen majorly represents the elastic rebound theory or Reed's elastic rebound theory that we generally use to understand the earthquake mechanism. That once the this was some kind of material that has been used, it was in the relaxed state. When it has been stressed to some kind of ultimate level, it will try to store some kind of strain energy within itself. But after exceeding this stress up to a certain limit, what we will observe that it will ultimately undergo some kind of fracture at this particular point, and ultimately leads to the release of energy. So this was the basic phenomena that we generally observe. So the propagation of seismic waves right from the generation of the because of the occurrence of the earthquake at the fault or some kind of movement of the tectonic plates, and this propagation of seismic waves to the ground surface. So this particular overall covers the entire seismology, where the study how these waves have been generated and how that has been reaching to the particular surface and how it is affecting to the structures that are actually built above the ground. So that can be understood. But the earthquake engineering, it starts come into picture at this particular place. यहाँ पे when the earthquake has occurred, यहाँ से earthquake engineering start नहीं होती है, but this earthquake engineering has been started at this particular point when this particular waves hit the bedrock, and from the bedrock it has been transmitted to the structure. So during this particular portion, your picture or a role of earthquake engineering comes into picture. So this earthquake engineering and seismology, coming on to this particular, so this engineering seismology is a very young subject. So because n number of researchers going on this particular area, and it not only deals with the aspects of seismology. What seismology deals with, it generally deals with the propagation of seismic waves, whether what kind of waves have been generated, how it has been transferred to the from layer to another material. It also deals with this estimation of this ground motion, that how what amount of energy has been released over here and how it has been ultimately leading to the formation of the ground motion. And ultimately, because of this motion, what will be the hazard that has been expected at a particular site. So all these things are covered in this particular subject of engineering seismology. And when it deals with the earthquake engineering, where we are having some objective to design some kind of earthquake resistant buildings, so we should also go for all these aspects that are being covered by this particular seismology. And one more objective that we generally have as a earthquake engineer is the prediction of this ground motion, whether what kind of time history has been generated by that, or what will be the maximum peak ground acceleration that has been generated because of some kind of input motion or the energy released within the because of the earthquake. So here the analysis that has been generally classified as in two types, linear analysis and non-linear analysis. In linear analysis, we majorly deals with the peak ground acceleration at the bedrock level, response spectra, macrozonation, seismic hazard analysis. So these all things are covered in case of linear analysis. Whereas when we are going for the non-linear analysis, here we deals with the acceleration time histories, microzonation corresponding to a particular city or particular area, and site specific spectra, which is being a kind of necessity for very large structures like nuclear power plants, or large dam structures, or large bridge structures. So when we consider the local site effects or the near field effects, then also it became a part of the kind of non-linear analysis. So earthquakes occur when two rock masses slide past each other. Like these are the two rock masses that will generally pass slide each other, and this is the structure that has been generally constructed on this particular rock masses. So as a part of that, uh, when this particular movement occurs, what will observe, and this movement is because of the release of some kind of energy, and because of this some release of energy, there will be some kind of distortion in the rock masses we observe, and it ultimately leads to the formation of some kind of seismic waves that will propagate up to the ground. So up to the ground, what we will observe that when these particular hit the ground, what will be the kind of damage that can happen, or the hazard that can happen at a particular site. So that was our primary objective, that we need to estimate the hazard level so that we can reduce the ill effects of the earthquake, because we can't stop the earthquakes from occurrence. We can only reduce the ill effects that has been associated with this particular phenomena. So in order to reduce that, what we are trying to do, we are trying to estimate the hazard before such kind of earthquakes will occur. And these hazards are estimated based on the previous data that has been available to us, like the number of earthquakes that are occurring, and what will be the range or magnitude of the earthquake, the frequency of those earthquake, and what will happen if an earthquake of magnitude higher than this will occur. So we need to prepare our structures in a form of earthquake resistant design of structures to that higher level. So in order to prepare that, we generally observe that the ground motion that has been generally uh, generated because of this earthquake can be in the form of acceleration time history or displacement time history, or it can be a kind of velocity time history. So depending upon the parameters we are interested in, we can use any of the time history. And this time history are generally because of the Nepal earthquake that has happened in the country Nepal in the year of 2016. So majorly these earthquakes, because as previously discussed, that earthquakes can produce vibration all the three dimensions, whether it is a longitudinal direction or a horizontal direction, a transverse direction, or it can be a vertical direction. So we can have this particular component, east west component, north south component, and z component of any of the ground motion that we have. Okay. Generally, it has been observed that most of our engineering structures have resonant vibration frequencies in the range of zero point 0.1 hertz to 10 hertz. So most of them, some of the structures, engineering structures that have some specific requirements, they can have the resonant vibration frequencies uh, not falling in this particular range and can be in some other range as well. But most of our engineering structures that we construct have resonant vibration frequencies in this particular range only. And how this natural frequency of any particular structure has been estimated, so we have a kind of general rule that the natural frequency of any structure can be estimated by 1 divided by zero point 0.1 n, where n represents the number of stories of that particular building. So based on this particular empirical relation, we can determine the natural frequency of any of the building. So it was not like that the phenomena of resonance was not known earlier. It was already known earlier, and the earthquakes also occur long back as well. So why this craze about earthquake has developed nowadays only? Is it any kind of fashion, or is there any scientific reason? What was the reason? Like, because uh, the engineering was also there long back 50 years ago as well, 100 years ago as well, but the people were not worried about this particular effect of earthquake. And most of the structures that have been generally constructed in the older times were not in fact, many of the structures that are being constructed nowadays also are not worrying more about the earthquakes. But but the recent earthquake phenomena that have occurred in the last few years have raised this particular need that any of the structure that we are constructing nowadays must consider some kind of earthquake forces in order to make it earthquake resistant, so that ultimately we can reduce the loss of economy as well as the social life. So the economical losses that the major thing that needs to be observed in this particular side is this: the kind of damage or the loss of economy that has been generally observed during some of the major earthquakes that have happened. In the year of 2001, a Bhuj earthquake has happened, जहाँ पर the loss of economy is approximately of 5 billion US dollars. And the recent earthquakes of Japan that we observe, that has uh, leads to the damage of approximately 300 US billion dollars, whereas the Indian budget, overall Indian budget in the year of 2014 was 301 billion dollar. So you can just, looking at this particular number, you can see that the kind of economic loss because of any of the big earthquake event that happened in the past centuries can leads to some kind of disastrous losses. Okay. So although like in any of the metropolitan cities like Delhi, Mumbai, or where we found that because Delhi is particular, I quoted over here because Delhi generally falls in the zone 4 or zone 5 category, mostly in zone 4 category. So any of the big earthquake that will hit this particular city will leads to some kind of losses that can be in a multi-trillion dollar level. So that's why the need of seismic hazard assessment has been actually raised up. And recently you will found number of researchers working in this particular area of seismic hazard, and they are trying to determine the seismic hazard of various cities, towns, or localities in their area or subsequent to frequent earthquakes. So as per the seismic zoning map of India, what we observe that this our whole country has been divided majorly into four zones, that is zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, and zone 5. And all these zones are having some peak ground acceleration of different level. Like zone 2 is having peak ground acceleration of 0.10 g, whereas coming to the zone 5, that acceleration level has reached up to 0.36 g. So depending upon the frequency of the earthquake and its susceptibility to earthquake, this zones has been categorized. And this zonation has been done majorly on the macro level. So in order to have a more determined zone factors, the researchers are working through the use of seismic hazard assessment to develop to further in the direction of the microzonation to develop some kind of more exact values corresponding to that particular locality. And these zone factors have been considered so that we can keep our structures safe in future, because we are quite uncertain about the earthquake, whether it may occur in next 50 years or design life of the structure, or it may occur after 100 or thousands of years. So we can only just predict it. So seismic hazard assessment is basically quantitative estimation of the hazard scenario at a particular site. Like if we talk about Indore, so we can estimate that any of the earthquake that has been hitting the region in the area of approximately 300-kilometer radius can be considered for the seismic hazard assessment as generally laid by the code. So because of the frequency of the uh, highly damaging earthquakes, and we have observed that numerous earthquakes have been occurring since years and centuries, and we can observe their effects can be felt as well. Like दिल्ली में कोई earthquake आता है तो we can even feel the effect of those earthquakes in Indore, or depending upon the frequency or the magnitude that has been the earthquake that has been generated. Okay, we can also seen that because of this earthquake event only the tsunami has been generated that can cause a huge amount of loss of life that has occurred in the country. So it is not necessary that only the portion that has been marked over here in the red, that is zone 5 and zone 4, are only susceptible to earthquake. It's not like that. It can be observed that number of earthquakes have also hit in the central part of India, that is considered to be as relatively safe because it was the peninsular India, and the number of earthquakes that are being generally observed over here were relatively less. So that's why it has been considered as relatively safe in the central and south India. But there are numerous examples of earthquakes that have occurred in the central India that has leads raised the possibility that our country, no part of our country is safe from this particular phenomena. The earthquakes that are generally observed in the central region of India is of Koina earthquake, Kilari earthquake, Latur earthquake, Jabalpur earthquake. All these earthquakes have magnitude of more than 5 or 6. Few of them having the magnitude of even 6.2, 6.3 as well, and some of them is having some magnitude of 5.9. So uh, because of these earthquake events, it has raised the possibility that we should also do some kind of seismic hazard assessment of the central India as well as the south India. Hence, it has been suggested to determine the earthquake risk of whole India at the micro level. So, in order to determine this particular seismic hazard assessment, what are the various steps that has been generally associated with this? So, the first thing, in order to do this particular seismic hazard assessment, what we need to do is we should have an idea of about the seismotectonic modeling. What is this seismotectonic modeling is? We should be aware of what are the active sources that are being lying in this particular region. So an active source can be a fault, a point source, it can be a line source, it can be an area source, or it can be a volume source. Any of those source can be called as an active source that has the capacity to produce an earthquake. Apart from that, it's not only the active sources, but also the associated sources like the movement of the tectonic plates, like the occurrence, the eruption of the volcano. So these are also the source, some kind of sources that can also leads to the possible causes of the earthquake. So together when they are combined, and the knowledge of this particular fault area source and the line source, other the sources which are capable of producing earthquakes is known as seismotectonic modeling. Coming on to the data that has been required for the seismic hazard assessment, it has been observed that this seismic hazard assessment majorly required the information about the geophysical setup. This geophysical setup majorly involves the data about the various faults. Now, how you can define the fault? So fault can be any kind of discontinuity that has been generally observed at the surface, or any kind of motion that has been observed. So that can be considered as fault. When that motion has been associated with some kind of depth parameter as well, then it generally falls into the category of geophysical anomalies. So together, geophysical setup and geophysical anomalies, this together forms the basis whether what are the basic sources that are being available in a particular region that can cause a possible earthquake. Apart from that, the information that we also need is about the tectonic setup of the area. So this tectonic setup majorly deals with the movement of the plates and the force that has been generally caused that can be associated for this movement. So that falls in this category of tectonic setup of area. Apart from that, we also need some kind of details about the seismicity of area. So what is seismicity of area? The seismicity of area majorly deals with the earthquake that has happened in the past. It can be an earthquake that has been recorded by some kind of instrument. So that can fall into the category of instrumental seismicity, and also of those earthquakes that have occurred in the past but has not been, but we didn't find any kind of records of those earthquakes uh, through any of the instruments. So that is also important. So in order to go for the seismic hazard assessment, we should have information about all those things that has been mentioned over here, like geophysical setup, geophysical anomalies, tectonic setup of an area, and seismicity of area. This together will combinedly provide us the information about this particular seismotectonic modeling. Because the earthquakes that the data of the earthquake that has been recorded at the various instruments or the various are also available in various scales, like, so there are n number of scales that are being generally used to measure the earthquake. So that magnitude scale, that might be possible that an instrument that has been lying in Indore, it is estimating some kind of earthquake magnitude or recording the earthquake magnitude in the form of a surface wave magnitude, or it might be possible that any of the instrument that has been located in Delhi can be recording the earthquakes in the form of body wave magnitude. So different instruments have different magnitude scales, and on the basis of that, the various scales, the data has been collected in the case of seismicity of area can be generally obtained in the form of various magnitudes. It can be a local magnitude scale, body wave magnitude scale, surface wave magnitude, and movement magnitude. It also depends upon the frequency of the earthquake, whether the earthquake that has been happening, it is of a larger frequency, or whether it is of a lower frequency. So based on that, uh, these various magnitude scales have been generally utilized. So as a part, because all these magnitude scales will provide us the data in some other scales, so we need, before moving for the seismic hazard assessment, we need to combine these magnitude scales in a single form, and we need to bring the data in some kind of single magnitude scale. Seismicity data. This seismicity of data is a kind of like whatever that we have studied, like about the fault setup and the previous seismicity of the area, geophysical anomalies. So what we observe that all these things are kind of qualitative things, because all these data can be available to us through some only a kind of interpretations. But the kind of data that has been required for this particular seismicity, this is basically a kind of quantitative data. And this quantitative data majorly is available, and in this quantitative data, what are the various information that we required is a kind of spatial and temporal coverage, homogeneity in size, declustering, and completeness in time, lower cutoff magnitude. Following are the information that are being generally required in the form of seismicity data, or in order to determine the seismicity of area. So spatial coverage and temporal coverage, these mainly deals with the amount of information that has been available around the surroundings that we are generally considering. So in case of spatial coverage, as I had mentioned that while performing this particular step of seismic hazard assessment, we observe that we consider an area of approximately 300 kilometers from the site of our interest, and we cover all the earthquake events that has happened and recorded in the various uh, stations pan located throughout the world. It can be collect This data can be collected, and apart from that, there are various events, because it is not necessary that an earthquake of a larger magnitude can only generate a larger frequency, and earthquake can of smaller magnitude can generate smaller frequency. It can also happen some kind of vice versa, that an earthquake locating nearby to the site, although it is of a smaller magnitude, can also leads to some kind of uh, disastrous effect on the site because of its larger frequency. So we need to cover all those sources. So that's why we used to cover all the possible sources of earthquake, whether it may be a fault, tectonic plate movement, volcanics, and all in this spatial and temporal coverage. Homogeneity and size. Homogeneity in size because all these data that has been collected in is in the form of various magnitude scales. So it has been suggested that all these data should be converted into a single magnitude scale. Declustering, because it has also been observed that any earthquake event, so the waves have been generated. So the events, the waves that has been generated can be a main shock, a foreshock, or aftershock. So we need to determine whether any kind of earthquake event or the waves that has been generated, because you will find while obtaining the data for this particular seismicity of the area that you will find numerous event on of the same date or nearby dates and falling after some kind of interval. So we need to identify which one is the uh, actual earthquake event. So which one is the main shock, which one is the foreshock, and which one is the aftershock. So we need to just uh, differentiate or identify the main shock from the rest of the shocks. Completeness in time. So because these earthquake magnitudes generally happens to occur at a very random interval, so we just try to see whether the earthquake events that has been provided to us, whether the data set that has been available to us is complete or not, because it might be possible that some of the events that have happened might not be recorded by the instrument. So we need to check the completeness of the event in time, and this also provide us a particular area about the frequency of the earthquake that has been happening, because this completeness method will provide, we generally used to do the seismic hazard assessment of those events only, considering those events only which are actually complete for a certain level of magnitude. So this data has been required. The next thing that has been required is the lower cutoff magnitude. This lower cutoff magnitude is one of the important thing that has been generally observed, because this is the minimum threshold value beyond which we used to do the seismic hazard assessment. So depending upon the data that has been generally collected, or uh, in the previous past we just try to, in order to identify the lower cutoff magnitude, we with the help of time and magnitude graph, we used to arrange all the events data that has been available to us in a particular format, and we can identify the basic level, like which one can be the threshold level in order to do the move forward move further for the seismic hazard assessment. Seismic hazard assessment, like I had done this for the particular Nimad and Malwa region. So it is one of the site that I had selected, which is the Punasa Dam site. It is located in district Khandwa, and it has been generally observed from the seismic zoning map of India that most of the Nimar region falls under the category of zone 3 on the seismic zoning map of India, and very little part of it falls under the category of zone 2. Okay. And why this region I had selected? Because there are n number of dams that have been constructed. Like for example, we have Punasa Dam, Omkareshwar Dam, and Maheshwar Dam, and these are a kind of structures that have been constructed uh, for a longer duration, and in fact it has been planned in such a way that because of the damage of these particular structures, it has been generally observed that it can ultimately lead to the loss of life as well as property, because generally it has been observed that downstream at the downstream of the river, most of the population city and these towns have been generally observed. So because if these dams may fail, it can ultimately leads to the a large amount of water can start flowing through this particular river, and it will ultimately lead to the loss of life as well as economy. So seismic hazard analysis, as mentioned by Professor Khare sir, that it is generally the quantitative estimation of ground shaking at a particular site, and it also plays an important role in the earthquake resistant design of structures, because the zone factors that we generally used for the while considering the earthquake forces are generally estimated through in the form of PJ through this particular seismic hazard analysis only. So there are majorly two methods for the seismic hazard analysis. One is the deterministic seismic hazard analysis and the other one is the probabilistic seismic hazard analysis. Deterministic seismic hazard analysis method generally involves a particular earthquake scenario. So here it has been considered that any particular fault producing certain level of magnitude can only leads to the uh, such kind of hazard at a particular site. So based on that, this particular, because here we are considering the single earthquake source or single fault source or area source that can produce the worst scenario or the worst earthquake scenario. So that has been used, and it is the earliest approach that is being generally used for significant structures like nuclear power plant, dams, large bridges, etc. only. In fact, it was the earliest approach, but now we are moving towards the more better approach, which generally, because here we generally ignore all the other earthquake possible events that can also generate some kind of seismic hazard at a particular site, because here we are considering only a single earthquake scenario. Okay, so these are the various steps that are being generally performed in the case of seismic hazard, deterministic seismic hazard analysis. The first one is the identification and characterization of all earthquake sources, selection of source to site distance, selection of the controlling earthquake, and hazard at the parallel site in the terms of ground motion parameters. So, moreover, the steps that we generally use to either follow in the DSHA or PSHA approach, they are more or less same, but there are some difference in the steps of both the hazard analysis that we generally used to perform. So it was the most common figure that we generally observe in any of the presentations that are associated with this particular seismic hazard analysis. So, like as I mentioned, that any of the source can be a line source, like the fault that has been represented over here. These are the line source. There can be an earthquake sources, like the dots shown in the here, and the group of these earthquake sources can also be cumulative, considered together in the form of an area sources. So this was the first step, or in fact few of the researchers generally used to create one more step that is known as step 0, which is basically the selection of site. So the selection of site and the identification of and characterization of all the earthquake sources, and determining the distance of this, that falls in the category of second step, that controlling earthquake. Like, because it is not necessary that the earthquake that has been produced over at this particular fault will produce the most severe case. So it can be possible that any earthquake that has been caused at this particular area source can also produce this earthquake. So in case of deterministic seismic hazard analysis, we consider only that particular worst scenario only by fixing the distance and the magnitude. Okay. Apart from that, the one more thing that we generally discuss in this particular sees any of the seismic hazard analysis, the use of the selection of the ground motion attenuation. So this ground motion attenuation is nothing but it actually provides an idea about the relation of this particular peak ground acceleration with this particular distance for a particular magnitude. Like, for suppose I had considered an event, magnitude of event, suppose 5, and I had considered that the source to site distance that I had fixed upon is approximately is 150 kilometers. So corresponding to that, some relation has been given to us based upon the researches that has been conducted by various researchers, and using those relations we can actually observe that how our peak ground acceleration is actually behaving. Generally, it has been observed that as soon as the distance has been increased, this particular peak ground acceleration generally falls, uh, try to follow some kind of pattern. So that attenuation relationship provides us the relation between this particular peak ground acceleration along with the magnitude as well as the distance. And with the help of this particular peak ground acceleration that has been generated because of the various magnitude earthquakes, we can have several graphs for this particular. And the ultimate, the hazard, the step of this particular is that the hazard at the particular site because of the worst case or worst scenario earthquake has been considered. So, discussing more about this identification and characterization of earthquake sources, because this will take a bit time. So, I'll try to keep providing you an insight of this particular, that in while dealing with the identification and characterization of all earthquake sources, we deal with the geologic evidences, fault activity, tectonic evidences that involves the movement of the tectonic plates, historical seismicity, the events that has been generally occurred in the past, and the instrumental seismicity, the earthquakes that has been recorded at the various instruments sites that has been located all around the and the distributed way all around the world. So all these things can be considered. The seismic sources can be identified by various of the other use methods, that it can be a geologic evidence, वहाँ पे कोई fault line हो सकती है, remote sensing के through we can observe, we can have the data from the instrumental seismicity, or we can have some kind of geophysical investigations. So all these methods can be used, or we can even go for the field reconnaissance. Source zones. Source zones that we generally use to define, it may consist of a kind of mapped fault. The fault whose geometry has been generally known to us, or the data about that fault has been available to us, that can be known as mapped fault. So that is generally, this mapped fault generally, or the source zones are categorized into two type: mapped fault or diffuse zones. In the mapped fault, we generally do for the areas from where the event information about the fault has been available, that can be categorized as the areas of high seismicity, or area of outcropping bedrock, like at places we can observe that some kind of rock has come onto the surface and it has been exposed to the surface, so that is known as basically the outcrop. And the areas where sparse superficial vegetation has been observed, because the areas जहाँ पे हम लोग देखते हैं कि people don't used to do some kind of agriculture activities and all, so that generally fall under the category of mapped faults or the known fault geometry. Whereas in the case of diffuse zone, all the things are vice versa to those that of mapped fault, that these are the areas of low seismicity, that the probability of the earthquakes or the earthquake data available in this particular zone is relatively very low. And here, because the surface is relatively plain, so you can find that a large amount of vegetation has been occurring in that particular area, and also a large amount of sedimentation cover has been obtained. Coming on to the fault activity, so as per the Nuclear Regulatory Commission definition, so if any of the fault is having some kind of movement uh, at fault or near ground surface within the past 35,000 years, so that can be considered as a kind of active fault. So you can see that in fact that movement can be of recurring nature within the 500 lakh years. So you can understand that right from the starting of the human civilization, the data must be available to us, but which is not possible. So source geometry, the source can be a kind of point source, line source, or area source that I had already shown in the previous picture. And the various earthquake potentials that are being generally dealt with, dealing with the seismic hazard are this MCE, DB, SSE, MP, OB, and SSEE. But majority of these, the major seismic hazard assessment majorly deals with the maximum credible earthquake or maximum considered earthquake (MCE) and the design basis earthquake. All these earthquake potentials that are mentioned over here are generally observed in some other codes, like the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that I had previously mentioned, U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But the DSHA, although the method is very easy and it has been even used for today for the significant structures like nuclear power plant, but there are some kind of limitations of this particular DSHA, that it doesn't deals with the explicitly with the uncertainty, and also it doesn't provide us kind of possibility of earthquake likelihood. like in near future some earthquake can occur, so it doesn't provide any such idea. So this was the major limitation that has been associated with this DSHA. Coming on to the probabilistic seismic hazard analysis, uh, it also this probabilistic seismic hazard analysis, it generally takes into account the seismic potential of seismic sources, because in case of deterministic seismic hazard analysis, we are considering only a single source that is capable of producing that hazard at a particular site. But here we used to consider all the potential sources that are lying in an area of 300 kilometers that can produce the potential seismic hazard at the particular site. It also includes the random nature of earthquake occurrences and random nature of ground motion, because it is earthquake is a kind of random phenomena that has been generally because we can't predict that the earthquake that has happened over here, so next earthquake event will happen over there. So it is a kind of random phenomena, it can happen anywhere in the considered location. And in the similar way, the ground motion, the waves that has been generated because of this particular earthquake can propagate in any of the direction. Also, the damage potential of the ground motion is also not known to us. So we consider all the damage potentials, because it might be possible that an earthquake of a smaller magnitude can even produce larger frequency, and even can earthquake of larger magnitude can produce smaller frequency, depending upon the location, position of the site that we are considering it. So it also involve all the uncertainties that has been involved at all the level process. So this probabilistic seismic hazard assessment takes into account all of these. So it was the analytical approach. It was generally developed by Cornell in the year of 1968, and it has been most widely used and accepted approach that has been used all over the world. So यहाँ पर हम लोग मेजरली दो अर्थक्वेक इवेंट्स के बारे में बात करते हैं, दैट इज द डिजाइन बेसिस अर्थक्वेक. This design basis earthquake is an earthquake that is having 10% probability of accidents during the 50-year design life of the structure. So it generally has been generally used in order to design the earthquake resistant design of structures. And in this design, we generally consider that this earthquake will produce some kind of minor or moderate damage on the structure only, and our structure will not collapse. Whereas in case of maximum considered earthquake, that has been generally defined as the earthquake having potential of 2% probability of accidents in 50-year only. So here the performance of the structures has been evaluated, and and in this particular maximum considered earthquake or MCE, this earthquake has been uh, generally the structure has been designed to a higher degree of hazard. So here we design the structure in such a way that the structure should undergo significant damage, but in this condition also it should not collapse. So these are the key assumptions that are generally being available with the associated probabilistic ground motions. So I'll not go much in the detail of this particular, because all these things have been covered on this particular key, what this probabilistic seismic hazard analysis generally does. So these are the steps of probabilistic seismic hazard analysis. So here also we have the identification and the selection of sources, then the selection of the recurrence, magnitude recurrence relationship. After that, we used to go for the ground motion, selection of the appropriate ground motion attenuation in order to understand the uh, peak acceleration corresponding to the site. And ultimately, the result has been produced in the form of some kind of hazard curve. So when this particular hazard curve has been given, it provides us the information about that it can be any kind of ground motion parameter, it can be a peak ground acceleration, it can be a peak horizontal velocity, or it can be a pseudo spectral displacement. So any of the, depending upon the our area of interest, we can take any of the ground motion parameter in order to develop this particular hazard curve. So this is the overview of deterministic seismic hazard analysis. Huh. So this is the global seismic hazard map that has been generally been available. So you can see that looking at this particular seismic hazard map, what we generally observe that along this particular Himalaya region, we found that it is moreover in the red color that generally represents the higher level of seismic hazard. Where in the central of India, it has been generally observed that relatively level has been low. At the same time, what we observe that at this particular area of the Japan, Philippines, and all these things, and at the western coast of this particular America, it has been observed that the hazard level is relatively higher in this particular zone. But if you look at this particular Africa as a continent, what you will observe that this Africa as a continent is relatively very safe, and you will not observe much kind of much number of locations where the seismic hazard is very high. Similarly, in the case of Australia, so it depends upon the position in the plate that it has been lying. So based on that and the number of events or the past historical seismicity, on the basis of that, the seismic hazard has been generally assessed for the whole world. And this seismic hazard map has been prepared by this particular Global Seismic Hazard Assessment Program, also known as G-Shape. Like, so this was the case study of our Punasa Dam site, and we have done this particular seismic hazard assessment of this particular site. And before moving on to the case study, I had taken in order to validate the data or the procedure that I am doing, whether it is a right or whether it is a correct or incorrect. So in order to do that, I had done this particular validation problem, and these are the results that are being generally observed from the book of the Kramer, and these are the results that I had obtained by solving this problem. And this is the particular curve that has been given in this book of Kramer, and this was the curve that I had obtained. So by that, I can relate that the procedure that I had opted is relatively far better, and it is almost correct because the we are having the obtaining the same level of same pattern of curve. So this was the continuous procedure. Amit sir,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
sir, do I have a time of 5 more minutes?
Sure,
Yes,
sir.
sir. You have, sir. No problem, sir.
Okay, okay. So rather than going for this particular problem that I had done over here, that I had collected the data from these many earthquake resources, and the total of approximately this data has been declustered, and this particular fault data, all these things you can see over here. That you can observe that the number of faults that are being available, these are generally collected from the Seismotectonic Atlas of India that has been available. At our institute. From this, the data of all these types of faults that are being generally available in the nearby region has been estimated. So that comprises of the neotectonic faults, subsurface faults, faults involving cover, basin cover. So these are the overall, the site in the black generally represents the actual site of Punasa Dam based on the latitude and longitude coordinates. And all the other earthquake events and the fault details have been plotted using MATLAB, and the similar way the GR parameters or the magnitude recurrence relationship has been uh, identified. This A and B values have been identified using this particular steps method. The all the calculations and PSHA, the particular methodology of PSHA has been adopted over here using all these equations, or a annual rate of probability of accidents has been calculated. So this was the attenuation relationship that has been given to us by Raghukant and Iyengar sir. Raghukant sir and Iyengar sir has provided this particular attenuation relationship for the central and western India that has been generally used in order to calculate this particular seismic hazard assessment at Punasa Dam site. So this was the seismic hazard curve that has been generally plotted with the, and based on that, it has been observed that we generally observe that the 2% probability of accidents in 50 years, that as per the code, what we obtained is that zone 3, generally as per seismic zoning map of India, the site that I had considered, it generally falls in the category of zone 3. And for zone 3, we have a zone factor of PGA value of 0.16G, and the value that I had obtained is also 0.157. That is almost nearly equal to the same that has been provided into the code. So that also validates my result that the values that has been obtained by the code is not much different from that what I had obtained. Right. So these are the results, and ha. Apart from that, I would also like to provide you an insight of this particular app that has been generally available on the Google Play Store. That is the Seismic Hazard Map of India. So this particular Seismic Hazard of India, this application has been generally developed by Professor STG Raghukant from IIT Madras, and that seismic hazard map of India, he has calculated and developed this map. With the help of this particular app, you can calculate the seismic hazard of India at any particular location. So you can use that. I had also attached that you find that the earthquake catalog has been available over here, and based on any earthquake the data that he has compiled more than 40,000 earthquake datas over past from collected from various seismic sources or various stations. So you can observe that we can select all the things, and on the basis of that we can directly calculate this seismic hazard map of India. Even the fault map of India was also available, and all the faults that are being generally observed, generally I had seen in the Seismotectonic Atlas of India are available in this particular. So this can be used like any of the particular site can be used for any of the particular site based on the latitude and longitudes. You can just select the site, you can just mark it, and you can obtain this particular PSHA values for this A-type rock sites, and they will provide you uh, zero period acceleration corresponding to 475 year return period, 2475 year return period, I mean dB, and for corresponding to MCA and all. So you can also use this particular, and ultimately the design response spectrum can also be obtained using this particular application. So I hope this an insight about this particular application will be useful to you and can be used for any further location. Uh, so this was the seismic hazard curve similar to that curve that I had obtained, and it is definitely for some other location, but the pattern of the seismic hazard curve is generally in this manner only. So these are the various references that I had referred. Uh, uh, thank you. I hope because of the time limitations, I had to rush at the end part of my presentation. So I couldn't cover all the things very much in detail. So I beg your pardon for that. And I hope the things that has been explained to you will be clear.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes.
I hope we will take your second lecture series for more enhancement of our knowledge. So
Thank you, sir.
participants, if you want to ask something, please write in the chat box.
So participants are encouraged to ask questions. You can write in the chat box, or you can even unmute yourself. We thank Nikun sir for giving such a wonderful explanation of the seismic hazard risk assessment study which he has been carried out. and also the free app that he added in the end was very
Sir,
useful.
please keep your camera on also.
Okay.
So we request to have a glance.
It was really sorry. I just forgot to switch on the camera.
No problem, sir. No problem.
So the participants are encouraged to get in touch with Nikunj sir if you have any doubt, or if you're working in that particular area.
2 minutes.
You
sir.
should definitely get in touch with sir. He will be very helpful, and he will be definitely guiding you in all respects with all his experience and his expertise.
Participants can also mail us. So we will take the response from Nikun sir and Khare sir, and we will revert you back.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your
Thank you very much,
experience
sir.
and expertise, sir. And we look forward to having you again with us in some session in the future.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So participants, if you have any questions, you can write to us, or you can even directly mail to sir.
I think it takes times to ask question because once they will see the video again and then they might get some questions. So no problem. So once again, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
So please
And we,
thank Khare sir also on our behalf.
Sure, sure, sure. It was actually a thanks to Khare sir only because of him only I had excelled this much in this particular field of seismic hazard assessment. And the reason behind this particular area of research in this field is Raghukant sir and Khare sir only, and looking at their papers and their research in this particular field only, just that motivates me to excel much more
act-
in this particular field.
actually, we are also taking guidance from Khare sir from time to time only. Not
But
from
sir, your
today,
work is very
for many
elaborative,
years.
very elaborative work you've done, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
So
So it was a
should we
pleasure
end the
interacting
session?
with you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. So shall I close the session or?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
sir. No problem, sir.
Thank you,
We
sir.
are ending the session now.
Okay, okay. Thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
Thank you, sir. So I requested to all the participants that they should come on time tomorrow. Please log in at 9:50 a.m. So with this, madam, should we end?
Yes, sir.
Okay, ma'am.
So that's for today. We will be hoping to see you again tomorrow at 10 a.m. for the next day of this faculty development program. Thank you to all the participants.